Reflections 2019. 3 questions and answers. Why reflect on the year 2019? How do you recall and remember your experiences? What can you do to objectively reflect upon your experiences to learn and to develop yourself? Hello, my name is Ejaz Hussain, and I'm pleased to share some of my learnings with you. Did you make contemporaneous notes of your observations, feelings, and the meaning you made within and in the context of your real world interactions and interrelationships? I did, and I did so privately and socially, for example, on LinkedIn. Within the international pharmaceutical community, today we are aspiring for continual improvement. The draft guideline of International Council for Harmonization, ICHQ 12, is an illustration of this yearning. Continual improvement to provide higher assurance of quality, to meet the needs of patients in the real world, for 21st century cures that are patient-centric and personalized. In this discussion with you, a community of pharmaceutical knowledge, I wish to share some of my learnings. This presentation will focus on the following 3 practical questions so as to improve the utility of this engagement. Question 1. Why continuous learning and continual development? Question 2. How to transform our experience into wisdom? Question 3. What is quality assurance in the 21st century? To answer these questions, I have collected and organized the meaning I have made of my own experiences. This meaning is contained in the phrase, care is research, knowledge is power, and wisdom is in practice. If you're LinkedIn, you will also note that this phrase is also the introduction to my profile on LinkedIn. Meaning making or sense making is at the core of learning to be human. How we make sense of our observations and thoughts determines the rate and extent of our development. Some of us will continue to develop at different rates and to varying degree. However, many will not. Why? I think it is because we don't know enough about various stages of adult human development and its relevance to our professional development. So the primary intention of this presentation is to improve awareness of the increasing importance of adult human and professional development. Trends in technology, economy, and population are exponential. In the real world, we see patterns in economy and technology that are exponential, yet year after year, we experience life linearly. The increasing gap between exponential trends and linear experiences pose many challenges, and we find ourselves in over our head again and again. We adopt new technologies without genuinely understanding their utilities and risks. We download apps and sign contracts without reading and understanding the threat posed. We get habituated and addicted and erode our cognitive abilities. We complain that our systems are unfair and are broken. The rich are getting richer, and the middle class seems to be eroding in many nations. These are objective observations. We fear that our policies are becoming anti-human in that preference for artificial intelligence over human intelligence is also evident. We are born, educated, and we work within systems. And to improve such systems, the only way to do so is to improve ourselves. We are acutely aware of the imbalance between economic growth and human development. This imbalance makes our system complex, and we need to reduce this imbalance. Anthropologically, we know complex societies collapse without the skills to resolve big problems. Skills of caring, acquiring knowledge, and being good practitioners. Care, knowledge, wisdom is research, power, and practice. Continuous learning and continual development. Why am I drawing a distinction between continuous and continual learning and development? Continuous is without interruption. Continual means reoccurring at a frequency. Learning is the acquisition of knowledge or skills through study or being taught and practical contact. Development is a specified state of growth, advancement, maturity. Development is the process of starting to experience. Experience as a verb is practical contact. Experience as a noun is to feel our emotions. In the context of our discussion today, continuous learning is a term related to formal, systematic, social, self-directed, lifelong education for the purpose of caring to be current in our careers. Continual development relates to experience as a noun. Um, uh, to experience is to feel our emotions so that we have caring for our purpose, people, meaningful satisfaction, and a yearning to be leader to improve a system. Continual development is essential for systems. It demands experiential learning. It is personal to a large extent. It demands reflective reassessment, recall, remembering, and it is necessary for systems to function effectively. Let us now consider continuous learning and continual development in the context of the first principle, first, do no harm. This first principle is reflected in our systems, such as regulatory system and quality management system. When cause and effect relationships are known, and they are so simple that anybody can understand those relationships, that means they are self-evident without specialized education, training, and experience, we will call that a simple system. When cause and effect relationships are known, but only when you have the right education, training, and experience, we will call that a complicated system. When cause and effect relationships are not known, and we must do research and experimentation to map out the cause and effect relationships, that means cause and effect are only known in hindsight after experimentation, we will call that a complex system. And when we don't know what the cause and effect relationships are, it doesn't automatically mean we are in a disorder. Chaos is a system which is not predictable beyond an average because of extreme sensitivity to initial or starting conditions. Initial or starting conditions could be material, such as raw materials, but also us. We are the initial conditions too. In chaotic system, you have a lot of freedom. Anarchy is a term often used in a derogatory term, in a manner. But if you are mature to be responsible for the freedom and you do not cross the line and you adhere to the principle of first do no harm, this is where creativity, innovation occurs. But since in a population, not everybody is capable of accepting freedom and the responsibility it brings, it is also where cheating by design occurs, where jugaad occurs, and becomes a problem. So our system of regulatory system, marketing authorization plus good practices, is reflected in the level of complexity. And to effectively manage such systems, not only do we need to have proper education and training, but we also need to have experiential development to lead efforts to be able to manage the uncertainties and complexities that range from complicated to chaotic all across. In this figure, I have put those boxes side by side, but clearly that's not the way it is. All these systems overlap. In any given moment, we could be dealing with simple to chaotic in a given regulatory or quality management system. Without care to do the right research, we commit errors of omission. And our good practices are not predictable. And when our good practices are not predictable or repeatable or reproducible or not properly calibrated, we make errors. We have errors. We have to reject batches. We have losses. And if you're not sufficiently developed to be able to manage that fear, that uncertainty that comes when you commit errors of omission and errors of commission, then chaos occurs in your mind. And if you're not sufficiently developed, then you have breaches in assurance of data integrity and all the violations we see in our regulatory system. So you can see that complexity is relative to our own learning and development. And we have seen that the complexity in the environment we are working in is increasing exponentially. Therefore, our learning and development is key to our survival, to our job security, and so on. Around the globe, good manufacturing practice regulations do recognize education, training, and experience, such as, for example, in the US, 21 CFR 211.25. However, these regulations were written decades ago, and we have not updated these regulations in the context of aligning the education, training, and experience with the evolving or exponentially increasing complexity in which we work. Complexity of our materials, of our products, of our analytical methods, and of business practices. Epistemology, how do I know what I know, is an important aspect of experiential learning. Is the reflective part, is the part that we evaluate, reevaluate, research our assumptions, and seek to reduce complexity. Epistemology is theory of knowledge. Knowledge is different from information. Information is literally available all around us. Knowledge is intimate. Knowledge is personal. Knowledge is emotion laden. It is important for us to differentiate between information and knowledge. Knowledge is to know the ledge when you fall off, not only with respect to your manufacturing processes, but also with respect to your mind. How do I know what I know is a simple question that, if we ask frequently, we bring in our thinking epistemology. We verify our assumptions again and again if necessary. Elephant in the dark, or Six Blind Men and the Elephant. This metaphor is useful for us to appreciate the misalignment, the imbalance between our learning and development to the level of complexity we face. The know-how for process control has existed for 70 years. We already have guidelines on how to control manufacturing processes, how to calibrate, make sure our analytical methods are reproducible and repeatable. However, what we do in material world per these guidelines is also useful for us in our mind. The advantage that we have is what we are required to do by law to be good practitioners, to have the right education, training, and experience. What we do professionally is reflected also in our mind, what we do personally. So the advantage we have as pharmaceutical professionals is that our work can lead us to be better human beings. Our efforts to be good practitioners is core to being human. And why not take advantage of what we do in the real world, on the material world, also adopt those same principles in our mind to improve our development, to be more suitable and capable for the responsibility we face. As we think about suitability and capability of a manufacturing process, let's think about suitability and capability of our thinking process. So it should be very clear why continual learning and continual development is so critical, and we all must pay attention. It includes systematic or disciplinary proficiency. We need our development to improve systems by improving ourselves. By doing so, we achieve satisfaction for ourselves and for others. This is why continual learning and continual development is so important, and our know-how for what we do in process validation, what we do for process control, and what we do for quality assurance is core to our own development. The question then is, how do we experience and how do we develop experientially? And then how do you transform our experiential learning to wisdom? Why do I say wisdom is in practice? And why we all know knowledge is power. What is that power? Power is the emotion, the drive to get things done. So professional development is to acquire knowledge by doing research. And research, the term is used broadly, not just what we do in laboratory. Research is to let our fingers do walking, to think about the information that we can gather. So research is reflected in the level of care we bring to what we do. Knowledge is understanding the ledges, the failure modes. And the power is our emotion not to have recurring errors, not to fall over the ledge in different levels of complexity and so forth. But wisdom is in practice because Knowledge and power that we generate has to be translated into action to fill the gap between what we know and what we should implement is wisdom. So, to summarize, we have been using the word experience, its dictionary meaning, as practical contact with subjects and objects in the real world. That is experience as a verb, but experience as a noun is to feel our emotions. The emotions are personal, subjective, and here is where we now have to work to change our habits through reflective use of epistemology. How do I know what I know? We continue to develop when our experience generates the very light we need to lead us out of its own darkness. This is the key message I take away from Frost's poem, which is so familiar to us. I learned this poem in school in India. Some quotes: poetry is when an emotion has found its thought and the thought has found words. These woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. In 3 words, I can sum up everything I have learned about life. It goes on. I am not a teacher, but an awakener. And that's what I'm trying to be today with you. We continue to develop when our experience generates the very light we need to, to lead us out of its own darkness. The darkness is the subjectivity, the biases, the conflict of interests, and so forth. And the light that we have to see within our own experience, which is subjective, is the intention to first do no harm. Intention is useful, valuable. It comes to us from our wisdom traditions. Let's not undervalue our intention. Use our intention to feel the dissonance and keep asking, how do I know what I know, in your reflective mode, and that's key to our development. To help think about this in a very simple way, I thought about this Russian doll model, which is so familiar to us. Looking good, being good, doing good, and seeing good are stages in our own development. I deliberately chose the word good to relate to good practices. Looking good is, as teenagers, we want to look good. That's the driving motivation. That's our intention. Being good then is a level of maturity that we want to be part of a group. We are part of a community, part of a corporation, part of a social system, part of a community of knowledge. But being good is not enough. We have to know inside what is good so that we don't keep assuming or be trapped in groupthink. Doing good is to know within inside what really is good, even when our surrounding, our assumptions, which everybody accepts, may not be right. But the ultimate level of development in this figure is to see good across the population. Even when something doesn't look good, we find something that is good to make sure we bring everybody up together. Now, Professor Keegan at Harvard University has a constructive development theory. Constructive means we are the makers of our own meaning. Development means development doesn't stop when we become adult. Development continues over a lifetime. And his stages of development are imperialist, socialized mind, self-authored mind, and self-transforming mind. Many of our leaders today are imperialist, very selfish. And below imperialist, I put Procrustean, from a Greek mythology, who was a selfish person, extremely cruel person who wanted to fit people in his bed. And if they were too tall, he would chop off their legs. If they were too short, he would stretch them. That selfishness that evilness is in all of us. It doesn't go away. All of these stages are within each, and like the Russian doll model, are nested. This is an intrapersonal model of good practice that I use, keeping in mind all models are wrong, but some are useful. So in that sense, given a level of complexity, given a level of fear I have, I can still do good, but I might not be able to see good. To maintain ourselves as to see good would be a goal I have in my objective in the next few years. Can I maintain myself, my development stage, to see good in every aspect, not do finger pointing, not blame the system, and so forth, and find solutions that can work across multiple systems? Doing good is being self-authored. Self-authorship is a very simple tool that we can use in day to day. So if you are supposed to follow an SOP, can you write that SOP in a way that is better than before so that the errors that occur by you and others using that SOP do not reoccur? That is self-authorship. Unfortunately, in much of the sector, we hire GMP consultants to write the SOPs, to write the policies, especially when you have an FDA warning letter. That is not a good sign. Self-authorship at every level of the organization. If I am a sweeper, if I am just a cleaner of your facility, I would expect him or her to be able to write that SOP. It will not be perfect. It's never intended to be perfect. But you give ownership to every level to have them approach their authorship of what they do. This is key to our development. And if we can do that at every stage of our development, in every level of complexity in an organization hierarchy, that's development. What I have done in this figure is to bring together two major theories from Professor Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize in Behavioral Economics, System 1 and System 2, thinking fast, which is automatic, intuitive, without thinking, much thinking, is without rational thinking or without verifying your assumptions. And thinking slow is analytic, with self and peer review, where reason dominates. Uh, um, Much of our time, 95% of our time day to day, is spent in system one. We don't use system two often. And Professor Keegan's orders of consciousness, which is fundamental to making our observations, our experiences from subjective to objective by asking, how do I know what I know? We develop ourselves, and we develop ourselves from third order of mind to fourth order of mind or fifth order of mind, self-transforming, self-authored, socialized. These levels of our development relate to the risk we pose to patients. One example is assurance of data integrity, and the breaches in assurance of data integrity that are so widespread in the sector relate to this in this way. When we make mistakes, we want to hide our mistakes because we want to look good, or when our boss wants us to um, do something which is not right, we don't want to rock the boat. We want to be good in for our boss. We have breaches in assurance of data integrity. So risk of biased decisions, actions, Cognitive biases such as framing effect, blind spots, and others are common across the sector. And the only way we can catch our blind spot is our intention, the light in our darkness, and to ask the question, how do I know what I know? And have the courage to find a solution. And that's our development. Assurance is confidence. To give assurance, we first must be self assured. So, professional development in the 21st century is to consciously go beyond traditional education and training to be self authored in what we know and how we know it. Now, self authorship, as I mentioned earlier, need not be a PhD dissertation, need not be a scientific article. It can be writing our own SOP, or if you are a graduate student, when you're doing a chemistry lab, changing the mindset there is instead of doing instead of teacher giving you a set of instructions of how to do the experiment, you may start with that instructions, but at the end of your experiment you are required to write a set of instructions of how to do the lab, which is better than before, is an example of being self-authored. To be self-transforming in filling the gaps between what we know and what we can implement is the key. If there are gaps, and we know there are gaps, and we cannot take action, then it builds up frustration within ourselves. And lingering frustrations makes us immune to to our intentions which are not being met, and we just give up. And that's what happens most of the time. We blame the system. Or what can I do? Our system is like that. And that's where all of us are not being part of a solution. And we let our systems deteriorate. And today, I fear that our systems are on verge of collapse. From our environment, from our economy, from our political systems, I see the challenges everywhere. Similarly, I think we within the pharmaceutical sector have remained rational, have remained more objective as compared to what's happening in the political system and elsewhere, because of our adherence to the first principle and our know-how of being suitable and capable in the processes we design and develop. I think that has saved us to some extent, but things are eroding. Why not we turn that know-how into not only improving our systems, but then some of us, the leaders, the senior leaders, should help improve the political system, the laws and regulations that need to protect the patients and our own humanity. To do all of this, we need to feel the need and know the ways to leverage our collective experiential learning. That's what a community of knowledge should do. Understand the multiple context of our abstract nouns. Quality and assurance are abstract nouns. One way to do so is by increasing our order of consciousness. A profiteer who learns to be patient becomes a professional who, with practice, becomes a good practitioner. So, what is quality assurance? I think quality assurance is the comfort, is the confidence we give to others, especially to patients and the healthcare providers. Quality assurance for 21st century means to provide confidence of therapeutic equivalence in the real world and to ensure that pharmaceuticals are not part of the nocebo cycle. Assurance means patient satisfaction. In the healthcare sector, efforts are underway to reduce error and to be patient centric. Quality improvement, pay for performance, outcome based reimbursement are some of the business models which the healthcare sector has begun to adopt. Within the pharmaceutical sector, we are struggling with availability, adherence to CGMP, and affordability of medicine. And we have to provide the assurance in the real world that patients are not compromised, their adherence is not compromised, especially for generic drugs when the color and shape of tablets and capsules change. To do so, I think we need to find satisfaction in adherence to the regulations ourselves. And we are the initial or starting conditions. So, to create the butterfly effect um, and to be a fractal in the cause and effect relationships that are that occur in our day-to-day activities. Competence, complexity, and culture have to be brought together, and to do so, we have to do that in our education and training. But we have to do that more so individually, personally, and collectively as a community of knowledge through our experiential learning. Experience is the key. In terms of maturity, one can look at our system and think about our regulations. Today, most of our regulations are management based regulations. And here we manage things. And I don't like the word manage because often when people tell me, sir, don't worry, we'll manage it, I know what will happen. Trial injections, testing into compliance, cheating by design, because we are completely dependent on check the box exercises. We file first our applications and wait for a CMC review staff to give us deficiencies, and we get trapped in multiple review cycles, and then we have warning letters and import alert. That's the second order of consciousness. That's being imperialist. And that's not even being socialized. When we have defined the characteristics of characterized and we are proactive, and we follow the compendial specifications which are minimally acceptable criteria, we run into stop and correct, but we don't cheat. We have batch rejection, but that's the loss we are willing to take. That's being socialized in the correct sense. And then when we have measured and controlled, we have quality by design, we have higher assurance of quality, we have real-time control, state of statistical process control, then we can start improving. Remember, corrective actions and preventive actions are not continual improvement. Continual improvement can only be undertaken when a manufacturing process is stable and capable. And it can be only be taken up by professionals who are suitable and capable of handling that opportunity that ICH Q12 is espousing. So we have to recognize that we need a critical mass of fourth order of consciousness in both regulatory authorities and in industry. We need to make sure that the regulatory authorities are competent, and the professionals in industry are competent to face the level of complexity that they face. And this is what is needed as we go forward. So in that sense, validation is personal, professional, and public. Validation is empowerment. When we are at the stage of looking good, when we are teenagers, we are seeking external validation. When we are being good, we are seeking external validation of the regulators. When we are doing good, we know we are internally validated. And if we are facing a regulatory regime which is not as advanced, we maintain our standard of quality, even if we have to do a bit more than what the minimal requirements are. So validation, if you look at etymology of validation, the word valid has evolved from the 16th century onwards. And today, the meaning of validation is threefold. One, the action of making or declaring something legal or officially acceptable. Two, the action of checking or proving the validity or accuracy of something. Three, recognition or affirmation that a person or their feelings or opinions are valid or worthwhile. So this is a dictionary definition of validation. So in that sense, validation is personal, professional, and public. And to achieve true validation in the public, we have to be truly validated as professional. And to be truly validated as professional, we have to be personally validated. So the suitability and capability goes 3, 2, 1. In a recent publication, not recent, it's actually now 2016 and 2017, I wrote a paper on how to break the pharmaceutical sigma barriers using Amgen as an example. It's available on internet, so please do take a look at it. And looking at my experience across 3 decades or more, I sense that the sector from Pfizer and Amgen, the top leaders, also struggle. So it's not that only small companies struggle. Everybody struggles in the regulatory system that we have today. And we are socialized to follow what FDA says. So at the start of the FDA PAT initiative in 2001, Pfizer visited FDA and told the FDA Science Board that they have adopted a policy of don't use or don't tell with respect to new technology. Amgen, when they started the Six Sigma journey, not the Six Sigma methodology, but to reduce the error rates to 3.4 defects per million opportunities, they had to overcome their mindset if I don't look, there is no problem. So our ability to change, ability to improve depends on, according to Professor Keegan, overcoming our immunity to change. We have a change prevention system, which is our regulatory system itself and our corporate system and our mindsets. But the feeling system is critical. We have to overcome our fear of, or overcome fear and have built, be self-assured. And self-assurance is self-authorship. And we need to manage our knowledge management system. So we have to solve problems. At minimum, we have to solve problems. And to solve problems, we have to focus on making sure our errors don't reoccur. That's an opportunity. And we have to learn and solve problems that others are having. So prevention of errors is the fifth order of consciousness, or being self-transforming. So this is what the senior leaders have to be, have to take. The technical experts and staff have to be at the fourth order of consciousness, that they can solve their own problem. And when they have a problem, they don't have the fear. They can raise their hand and say, we have a problem, let's solve it. So in that sense, culture of quality is a paradigm that we can think about, a framework to think about culture of quality. Culture is visible in an environment of a corporation or a school or whatever. Culture depends on leadership emphasis, their message credibility, peer involvement, and employee empowerment. Employee empowerment, as I noted before, is validation. Validation means self-authorship of their own job or their own function. That's a goal that we need to set for ourselves. So we all are GXP boosters, good manufacturing, good laboratory practice boosters. To do that, we have to remove fear, to be self-assured. We have to be conscious, that means to be available for attention, with pay attention, and we have to practice to be masters. Adherence and affordability depends on our mastery. Efficiency depends on our mastery. We work within a system, so we have to appreciate a system, and we looked at simple to chaotic systems. We need to understand that. We need epistemology. How do I know what I know is a question that we ask. We need to understand variation, statistical process control, and we have to change our behavior. Change of behavior, change of habit is development. And that's how we can improve a QMS. The enablers for culture of quality is when the environment, the corporation, or wherever we are working on, We have to make quality is normal, easy, and rewarding. This is what quality by design is all across the corporation. In that sense, so let me summarize: care is research, knowledge is power, wisdom is in practice. The principle first do no harm, and 21st century quality and cures. There are uncertainties and complexities in the current system, and that keeps increasing. So, quality of our development of our products, processes, and ourselves is key. Effectiveness of quality management system is the key. And we need to be aware of abuse, adherence challenges, availability issues, affordability issues, and assurance needs and authenticity demand in the real world. That is, we need to hear the voices of patients, and we need to have one quality voice within our organizations. We get compartmentalized, we hold on to compartmentalized information, we don't share information, we hide things, but also we are competing within our own departments and so forth, and we are the regulators are outside. So one quality voice is across a community of knowledge, across the sector, and the deltas are the gaps that exist. And the pre-market phase, let's remember, randomized double-blind placebo control provides the gold standard of evidence, but our efforts to account for placebo effect is very much important, but we don't remove placebo effect and nocebo effects. These remain in the real world, and we have to reduce our errors. We have to build trust, and we have to make sure that negative messages because of quality failure, GMP violations do not tarnish our name and the name of our corporations, so that we can truly provide assurance of quality we need in the 21st century. And that's the reason why I say care is research, knowledge is power, and wisdom is in practice. So, to summarize, I have written some papers which go hand in hand with this presentation. So I would urge you to get those and review those. One is self-authorship of performance standards is necessary to break the pharmaceutical 2 to 3 sigma barrier, and chaos to continual improvement part to harmonization. So what we have discussed is a way to personalize 21st century quality. Recognize that humans tend to be predictably irrational and are prone to cognitive biases. We have acquired immunity to change prevention system, feeling system, and knowing system. The change prevention system is evolving with ICH-Q12 guideline, for example. We have to focus on understanding and leveraging our feeling system, and we need to pay attention to knowledge management, recognizing that knowledge is not information. The regulations that we have provide a foundation, but we also recognize that the regulations were written decades ago. We have to go way beyond our regulations. Stages of adult development, good clinical laboratory and manufacturing practices and pharmaceutical quality systems are interrelated and come together. And we now have a way to think about how to align our development, align our development needs with the level of complexity of systems, and the guidelines that we have, say for example the PAT, process validation, ICH guidelines, and so forth. The principles and practices recommended in these guidelines are surely for the material world, but those same principles are useful for our own development. So let's leverage it. I hope this was a useful discussion for you. All the best and a very, very prosperous 2020. Let's make sure we can see clearly now. Thank you.